nobody else
Hello,
is.
hello, 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 hello. We are live. Well, you're probably not watching this live, but maybe you are. This is WeatherBrains 477, the pre-show for March 16th, 2015. And Brian and I are just trying to figure out, where's everybody else? It's like
Oh, Bill.
usually John's here.
Bill's in the air somewhere, right?
Yeah, who made Bill mad last week? He hung up on us and he's not coming back. I mean, was it you or me or somebody else?
I don't know. I don't think I did it, but I mean I don't know. I didn't do it on purpose, that's for sure.
Well, somebody offended him in this world that is so easily offended. No, I don't know. He's flying somewhere. Where's he going? To Canada? Is that what his note said?
I think that's what he said. Yes.
Well, don't mean to keep you up there, Brian. I know it's past your bedtime. Don't start that.
It's been a long day. Yeah, yeah, I know it.
So you say you didn't get an invite? Somebody just
well, no, I just saw it up there. It said James, Nate, Aubrey, and it had a little green camera. So I clicked on the camera, but I never heard it actually, beep or ding,
ringy ding ding. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, this is the pre-show for those that are just joining us. The actual show begins here in about 10 minutes. If you want to move the slider over. This is for the YouTube crowd only. This is not part of our produced audio podcast. This is the bonus material. Belly laugh. So you don't get this on the audio show, only right here. Boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasional nonsense. So that's what the pre-show is all about.
James, the way you point, at the screen like that,
yeah,
it reminds me of when I was at the Weather Channel and we were doing the morning program, and I did that. I pointed at the camera. We went to commercial, and the producer came up to me, and he pointed right between my eyes and said, "Don't ever do that again."
Wow.
Yeah, he said, "You do not point."
Well, I'm just going to point I'm just going to do this the whole show, and I hope this guy's watching. Now, that's like my picture on Twitter and everything. I mean, that's like the.
Oh, I know.
Goodness.
That's what Uncle Sam does. I want you.
Yeah, exactly. That's where that came from, was Uncle Sam. So
why aren't you supposed to point?
Yeah, I guess it's impolite. Is that the deal?
Yeah, he told me it was offensive. And he said, "Don't ever do that again." So now I only pointed him.
Wow. Goodness. All right, so yeah, we got Bill is out. I think everybody else is in. And let me see if I can get Kim on here. The fact that we know her, she can handle the pre-show. Yeah. I try not to get our guest on the pre-show because I know they'll run. I mean, they will determine that this show is toxic and they don't want to be on here. So,
show title.
Toxic, exactly. This show is toxic. So no, we'll pick up Nate. I think we'll start on time tonight since we just have one guest. I mean, this is working. Yeah. We have to wait. We have to actually wait on us to get on cable. Now, if Kim doesn't get the invitation, Brian, you're in charge of figuring out how we're going to get her on here.
Ooh.
Yeah,
but
right,
you invited her to a test hangout, so.
And we completed it, so successful.
Okay. All right, we're good.
Okay, I'm on WeatherBrains.
What?
Is that what you're doing?
What?
My wife had to run an errand, and she just got in. She was letting me know she was here, and I was letting her know I'm occupied.
I'm on WeatherBrains. So I was on another podcast today.
Which one?
I was on it.
Yeah, Brian, you were on that North Carolina podcast, right?
Yeah, that's last Wednesday. That was fun.
Yeah, those are good guys. It's Ricky Matthews and those guys. Yeah, that's
talking about the blizzard of '93 and some of the memories.
Oh yeah, how was that? I missed it.
It was pretty good. One of the guys on there that's about my age, I think, or maybe just a few years younger than I am. was amazed at some of my memories. But I guess when you have a big event like that, I think it has the tendency to stand out.
Yeah.
Brian, does their podcast operate like this one does, pretty much?
Yes.
Is it the Google Hangout? I'm doing it in like April 8th or 7th or something like that. So,
what's your topic?
I think we're going to talk about the watch and warning process. They're trying to get me and somebody from the SPC on to kind of go through the whole progression of Outlook watch warning, and should be interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty laid back. They shot for an hour and ended up with an hour and a half, just like us.
Hey, did you guys see Aubrey? Looks like she was in a sauna somewhere.
I saw that.
I saw that. Yeah, I wondered what happened to her.
Boy. Hey,
Kim, can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Okay.
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yep. Good.
Give us like a mic check. Just kind of talk for a second there.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Good.
This is
No,
Kim.
audio good, video good. You're good. Now, where are you tonight, Kim?
I am in Greenwood, Mississippi.
The Dallas of the Delta. Wow.
Yeah.
Actually, Greenville is the Dallas of the Delta, not Greenwood. But
Big difference.
No, that's.
What's the difference between Ville and Wood? Yeah.
Well, I think Ville is bigger, and so it's
I
like
think it is.
Greenwood is the I don't know, like the Fort Worth of the Delta.
Something like that.
No,
They have
Kim,
a very nice bookstore
thanks for coming on the show. I apologize in advance for. I know you're busy, so I apologize in advance for any foolishness. This is our creative outlet. I think I don't know if all those times we talked about this, but everybody needs a creative outlet. I mean, this is our outlet, so
Absolutely, I love it.
Nobody
I remember the
here.
one where you had Johnny on.
Oh yeah. That's right. You were here for that. That was we did that one in the studio in there. But nobody here except maybe Kevin is a professional broadcaster. It's just all weather people. I consider Kevin a professional broadcaster. I think you're the one pro broadcaster of this group. You're a communicator. Huh? Do you think so?
James, how do you describe yourself then?
I'm just a schmuck. I don't know if you guys know this. My first major in college was electrical engineering. And I've never taken any. Going to go design some widgets for Southern Company. No, it's like I've never taken a class on being a TV man or a podcast host or I don't know any. Most of us are faking it. Now Aubrey's a good pro. She's a pro. We have to ask Aubrey, where are you?
I'm in our guest bedroom.
Okay. I see bear back there.
You can see the bear in the back, yeah. And I've finished, we finished, let's see if I can weather wall this. Let's see, we've got a picture here and a picture here. Those are frames that my husband made. So this is our weather-themed room, like yellow and gray. Nature
I'm questioning, though, why she had some difficulty pointing at something that was behind her. Isn't that what you do every day?
Well, yeah.
Nice.
I thought she did pretty good. I was impressed.
On occasion, when I actually do the weather and I'm not doing weather stories.
You just kind of turn it off.
Yeah.
Now, Aubrey, when you first came on the air, it looked like your camera was fogged up. We thought you were in a sauna or something.
I think there was just something on the camera, so I was kind of like cleaning and checking it. So I don't know what was on there, but
we had one of these WeatherBrains After Dark episodes here.
I was like, oh, geez, is it the lighting? I don't know what was wrong, but I think it's a little better. So.
Okay.
The hand lotion got on.
Yeah.
Now, I've had Gradu on my camera before, but it doesn't give that sauna look to it. This is like a booger on the camera.
Exactly
all right.
what it was.
And boy, the minute I said that, we hit the cable. I looked up, and the minute I said that, we're on cable. So, welcome to all of us watching on cable television, and
if they stayed watching.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I can show those dials clicking, or maybe it piqued their curiosity. Who knows? So anyway, we're all here, so let's get this thing going. We're starting on time. I think you could count the number of times on one hand we've started this show on time before. So here we go. Let me get the recorders going because that might help to record these. Record track 1, record track 2, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Whether it's a tornado or just some rain, WeatherBrains. Whether it's snow or a hurricane, WeatherBrains. Informative and fun, sometimes absurd. It's a show for all you weather nerds, WeatherBrains.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, WeatherBrains.
Oh, yes, we are WeatherBrains, the world's greatest podcast about weather because it is the only podcast about weather. No, there's others. There's varying shows out there. Anyway, thank you. This is WeatherBrains episode 477 for the 16th of March, 2015. Get set for a wild ride.
Informative and fun, haven't you heard? It's a show for all you weather nerds, WeatherBrains.
One more time.
Oh, yeah, WeatherBrains.
Oh, yes. We are here just past the Ides of
That's
March.
right. I was just
Past the Ides here on the 16th. So I got a big cast. First off, we'd like to go through the absentees. I think there's only one. Bill Murray. You know, Bill Murray hung up on us last week, and he didn't come back this week. Who made him mad? John, was it you?
No, it wasn't me.
I don't think John has made anybody mad. You know, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about John or Rick Smith, but both of these guys. Now, Kevin, yeah, Brian, yeah, absolutely.
Just haven't listened hard enough.
Not Aubrey, but anyway, Dr. John Scala's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So how warm did it get at your house today, John?
54, James. It was breathtaking.
I notice you're in your tank top and flip-flops tonight. So
it's astonishing how much snow is gone now, and all the ice on the rivers. I mean, the Susquehanna still got ice, but the Conestoga, which is near my house, was completely ice covered. It's all gone. It's amazing how quickly that reversed.
Wow. Yeah, it's the big thaw. It's on. Where we are, down here in the deep south, we had 81 at the Birmingham airport. First time we've hit 80 this year, and that was let's see, about 17 above average, and within 4 or 5 of the record. Brian Peters, how close were we today?
4 degrees. The record's 85, so we were just 4 degrees. And isn't it amazing how quickly it changed too?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think for almost everybody on this show, we just snapped out of this winter, and all of a sudden it got warm.
Plus, my forecast yesterday wasn't so hot. I think I forecast 76 or 77 for today. So.
Oh, I think people will forgive you with a bust in that direction.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but I have to say, James, that not only is the warmth nice, but it was certainly nice after nearly a whole week of nothing but clouds and maybe just one little short period, one afternoon of a little bit of sun. It was nice to see the sun over the weekend, so that was a very pleasant thing, and that was forecast accurately.
Oh yeah. So let's talk with Rick Smith now. Rick, north of you, I saw some low 90s in Nebraska and Kansas today.
We had a low 91 degrees out in the Panhandle, not too far away from here today, and lots of upper 80s. And we've been dealing with a huge wildfire up in far northwest Oklahoma, where the high was in the upper 80s today, 77 here in Norman, and we did just flip a switch. I mean, it just went from winter to spring to straight to summer in some places already, it seems like. But now we're just waiting for the other part of spring to arrive.
So tell us about that wildfire. I noticed it was showing up nicely on radar. There were evacuations. That looked pretty nasty.
It was pretty nasty. Fortunately, it was north of Woodward, which is the biggest city in that area. So they did evacuate some rural areas, and they did lose at least one house, I believe. And it was huge. They were doing airdrops with the helicopters, and the Forestry Service here was really on top of things and had pre-deployed resources and already had kind of reserve those helicopters for that purpose, so they were able to get on it quickly. But just if it had been 10 or 20 miles further to the south, it would have been a whole different deal with a bigger population center in the path. But hopefully that'll get knocked down, and there's rain on the way, so hopefully that's the worst of it for now.
Has it turned real dry out there, Rick? It seemed like you were wet there for a while.
Yeah, well, it never really got wet out in the western part of the state.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's dew points out there right now are running, well, relatively humid for the 30. So there, I mean, it's not terribly dry. I mean, we've had 5-degree dew points out there, so it's all relative.
It is.
Relative dew point, relative humidity.
So, Kevin, how warm was it today in Wichita Falls, Texas?
We did 79 today at Shepherd Air Force Base. And before we go any further, I do want to mention right after this program, I will be doing another show teaching John and Rick grumpy lessons. So stick around for that.
Boy, I need that for sure.
I, by the way, was in the presence of greatness yet again on Friday because I got to travel up to Norman and the National Weather Center and have a spring media severe weather workshop with none other than the legendary Rick Smith. And thank you for a great visit up there and the stuff that you had like 87 different presentations last week, didn't you, Rick?
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, we had 7 hours worth of material crammed into 2.5 hours.
Man.
And there's always too much to talk about, and it's UTV people have such busy lives. It's hard to get you all together, and I do appreciate you and the others who came up from Wichita Falls and Lawton, and even some from the Sherman Denison market who came up. So we had 7 of our 9 stations represented. So thank you.
I thought
so shame on the other 2.
Yeah. I'm about to say let's call out the 2 that didn't show up.
It was all the Oklahoma City stations. The 2 that didn't were the Telemundo station, who has a staff of the entire staff didn't show up. It's one person, so they get a break. And the other one was the other Sherman Denison station, who it's 100% as far as I'm concerned. I'm happy with it.
So essentially what you're saying is that other station doesn't count. It's like they don't exist. That's even worse than calling them out, Rick. Just to say, they don't matter, really.
We missed our friends at KTC and KXII, 2 of the best TV stations in the world. We missed them. Their absence was noted.
Keep digging, Rick.
Somehow we made up for it.
Rick is running for office too.
Isn't there someone else introduced at this point, or no? It was good, and Kevin, thanks for coming.
Well, I appreciate it. It's a wonderful facility up there. What a great building, and so much cool stuff going on there. I'm anxious to come back.
Hey, Rick, did Kevin fall asleep during your session there? Was he drooling and snoring during the program?
No, Kevin was a conversation starter. He was not
That's
shy.
putting it politely.
Controversial topics.
Yeah, he was the clown back there asking hard questions.
He did, and that's what we needed. That's what we want is questions.
He's an instigator.
Yeah.
I got worried a minute ago when Rick started to talk. He says, well, you television people, when he said busy schedules, I thought he was going to say we have such short attention spans, which would have been also very right.
Fire investigators call that an accelerant.
I like that. The accelerant.
That's what you
Sometimes that's what it takes to get it started.
Yeah.
So Aubrey Urbanowitz is sitting in her cozy studio at home with her best friend Bear.
Bear just rolled over, I think. I wore her out. I went for a run as soon as I went home, or I got home from work, and I think I wore her out.
Cool. So what's happening in Harrisonburg?
It was 76 degrees. 76. We forecast 73. It was 76. It was amazing. My husband's my father-in-law was in town on business, so we had him over and grilled out, and then we're going to meet him again tomorrow night. We're going to go out for St. Patrick's Day, and it's a beautiful week, and then maybe a little rain snow mix by the end of the week.
No, you guys have a nor'easter coming up there? What's it looks like? Interesting.
Fun. Yeah, it definitely could be interesting. So we'll have to watch the wedge of the high and that cold wedge, and see where we end up. But I think timing's a factor. The GFS was much slower when I looked at it earlier today. It didn't bring anything in until early Friday, whereas the NAM and the Euro were bringing things in Thursday night. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, John, what's going to happen with you up there with this thing?
John has left the building.
John has exited the room with the whole studio here. Who made John mad?
He heard the snow potential and was like, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, Brian, bring in our guest before she hangs up
there
on
he is.
us.
There he is. He's back.
Oh, yes. Well, we have a wonderful guest that both James and I know that we have become acquainted with after April 27th, 2011. Kim Cross is an award-winning writer and editor, and she began writing for her local newspaper as a senior in high school. After graduating from the University of Alabama with a journalism degree, she joined the founding editorial team of Business 2.0 magazine and covered the dot-com boom and bust in San Francisco. But she came back to Tuscaloosa for a graduate fellowship in the journalism school, where she published in-depth reporting projects for the Anniston Star and the Birmingham News. She also did kind of honed her reporting skills as a beat and spot news reporter for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, where she covered double murders, hurricanes, and most harrowingly, local government.
Thankfully, not in the same story.
She refined her feature writing at the Tampa Bay Times, which was at that time the St. Petersburg Times, which I know very well. She worked on the staff at Southern Living and Cooking Light for nearly a decade before quitting her job to focus on writing the book, and that's what she's here for tonight. Kim's work has just been published. I think, wasn't it, Kim, March 10th was the official publication date of What Stands in a Storm, which is a book all about April 27th, 2011. So, Kim,
yes,
tell us about yourself that I haven't already said.
Well, thank you for that very fine introduction. That makes me sound smarter than I really am. Isn't that what bios are supposed to do? So I just published my first book. It's called What Stands in a Storm. It is a narrative nonfiction account of the biggest superstorm in recorded history by the small margin over the 1974 storm. And it tells the story of the storm that ravaged our state through the characters who lived it, through meteorologists, including Brian and James, and through characters who were in the storm's path. So the book took about a year to report and write, and is based on hundreds of hours of interviews, or more than 100 hours of interviews, a lot of research that looked at the social media that was out there. Tons of people filmed the storm on their iPhones and posted the videos on YouTube, and there was just a wealth of information out there that I tried to piece together almost like a mosaic to put together a picture of the storm. Oh,
right,
look at that.
And you did some very interesting things. I can't remember the name of the software that that you were showing me, where you kept your timeline running. What was the name of that software?
Oh, yeah, it was actually a web-based app called Time Glider. Yep, I input the starting and ending times of the tornadoes that happened in Alabama, and it pieced together an interactive timeline that allowed me to see at any given point how many tornadoes were on the ground and where they were and of what size and how many they were hurting. And that really helped me wrap my head around something that was mind-bendingly complex.
Well, where did the idea or the inspiration for this book actually come about, Kim?
It actually started as a magazine feature. When I was working for Southern Living, I was a senior editor when April 27th happened, and I remember being sent home from work, sitting on my couch with my husband and my son, who was 3 years old at the time, and watching James Spann on TV, and watching the footage of the tornado coming through Tuscaloosa, which is where I went to undergrad and graduate school, so I knew the town very well. My husband had lived there with me when I was in grad school, and I remember sitting there and thinking it was so surreal, and to see a town that I knew really well being torn up right before our eyes. And at some point we had the thought that, wow, people are dying right now as we're watching this. So shortly after that, it came towards Birmingham, and my husband and I and my son, we live in Hoover, and it appeared to be on track, for all I knew, to hit us. And at some point, the power went out, and so I got on my phone, my cell phone, and I knew that James was good at tweeting warnings. He tweeted a link to the live stream footage, so we were able to watch the broadcast on our cell phones while sitting in our laundry room with helmets on and with our kid thinking what's going to happen. And I remember at some point I think he called out our neighborhood. And anyway, all of that to say it was a really deeply personal storm. And when I went back to work, the editor of Southern Living at the time, Lindsay Bierman, said, we really need to do a story on this. What do we do? And I was one of a couple of writers on staff with a journalism background. And so everyone kind of looked at us and said, what do we do? And we sent a team of reporters and photographers out into the disaster zones in several states. And we canvassed these areas and then reconvened and looked for universal themes that were coming from everywhere. And we tried to think about what we could say that would still be relevant in August, which is the soonest we could get a story to run in the magazine, because the magazine has a long lead time. So we found 3 themes: faith, food, and fellowship. And we found like those were kind of universal across not only tornadoes and cities, but across many disasters, whether it was an oil spill or a hurricane or 9/11. And anyway, we put together a feature that ran in August, and a lot of Southern Living readers wrote in to say that it really meant something to them. Some of them said, you know, I've been reading for 30 years, and this is the first time I've ever cried while reading Southern Living. So anyway, it touched a lot of people, and a lot of people said, it made me proud to be Southern, and yeah, me too, that's what we experienced where I live. So it got me to thinking that, you know, maybe there's something bigger here, and a story that needed to be told. And I went looking to try to find a story or a book that made sense of the storm, because I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. And I couldn't find like something equivalent of The Perfect Storm or Isaac's Storm that had been written about tornadoes. And so I thought, well, maybe this is it. So set out to tell it, where the Southern Living story really focused on the aftermath and the beautiful things that came in the aftermath. I wanted this to make sense of the storm and the magnitude of it, because I feel like the weather events that followed, or the news events that followed, really quickly moved this out of the public attention span. I guess it was Joplin came not too long after April 27th, and then Osama bin Laden was killed, and then it kind of, the national media moved on, and a lot of these towns were forgotten. So I wanted to show, I guess, you know, what stands in a storm, and how the things that seem to tear our world apart also reveal what holds us together.
Exactly, in your book, when do you begin? Because I know that you tried to cover, you know, not an extensive period of time, but when do you begin and when's more or less the end, for, you know, of the period of time that you're covering?
Well, you know, the first chapter starts with the moment in the middle of the storm, and then leaves you with the question of what happens, and then it flashes back to the days leading up to the storm. So we watch all of the ingredients for tornadoes falling into place, and then it goes through the storm, and the book's basically built or broken up into 3 parts. There's the storm, the aftermath, and the recovery. So the storm takes us up through the storm, and then the recovery is basically immediately after, and then the aftermath is immediately after, and then the recovery takes us through a year later and then some. So we see people, I guess, remembering on the anniversary of the storm. You know, how are they dealing with it? Where are they a year later? And then we get a glimpse of people a little bit farther out who were, some of them were blown to a better place. And yeah, so it covers a little bit of time, but it's fairly chronological because I wanted it to be easy to follow.
Hey Kim, this is Rick. I love the book. I ordered it last week when I saw, I think James posted something on Facebook about it. I got it on Friday afternoon, and I went on a binge reading extravaganza on Saturday. Couldn't put it down, and by Saturday evening I'd read the whole thing. It's great. I mean, it's easy to read. It is not a meteorology book. It's the story. I think you've said this, and I've seen others say it too. It's the story of the people. It's not the story of the mesocyclones and the warning polygons and things like that. Although all of that is a part of it. And just a couple of observations and questions. I was impressed by by the scientific accuracy, the best I could tell, the best, all I know about the event. And it was clear to me that you did some research, and you tell us a little bit about how you went about looking into the scientific accuracy of what you were writing, and how that process worked.
Sure. Well, I started from scratch, and what I wanted to do was something akin to what John McPhee, the writer, does for geology. He's a writer who has written countless books about geology, and who makes something that potentially esoteric really come to life with really great metaphors that the layman can understand and visualize. So I wanted to try to do that with meteorology, but it was a challenge because geology happens, you know, in the physical world with things that you can picture. But meteorology, weather plays out in 3 dimensions plus time, and a lot of the time it's invisible. So, plus it is so mind-bendingly complex. So for me, I started, and this is kind of embarrassing, but it's true, I started with children's books about tornadoes, National Geographic and just kids' books, so I can just get, okay, what are the real basic broad brushstrokes? And then from there, then I progressed to, you know, textbooks and other more scientific documents, but I wanted to kind of start with the basics. And then I spent countless hours bugging Brian and James and Kevin Laws and Jim Stefkovich and Chuck Doswell and Greg Carbon. I think, you know, I tried really hard to spread out the work so no one got sick of me too quickly. But I you know, what I wanted to do was almost make the storm a character, so that people, again, would learn some things about tornadoes that they didn't know, and potentially some things that they could apply the next time the weather turned, to make better informed decisions. But I also wanted them to be very engaged in it. I didn't want it to read like a textbook. So I kind of tried to embed the science in the narrative, almost like, you know, a mom sneaking vegetables on a kid's pizza, so that you're reading it and it's interesting, but you don't realize you're learning something. But, you know, in the end, it really came down to a lot of fact-checking. And I have to say, Brian was wonderful and so helpful. He met with me several times with visual aids and maps, and showed me how to use different types of software and online, you know, repositories of information, and he really guided me very gently through without making me feel, you know, stupid, because it's so complicated. But you know, and several times I went back with follow-up questions to him, and he never seemed to get sick of my endless questions. So Brian, thank you. You're awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you. I enjoyed the time we spent talking about all the events and what I learned from you from your interactions with other people in the events.
I could tell, you know, I could just tell how passionate you are about the weather and teaching other people, and it made it really fun. So I think in the end, the accuracy, I'm so glad to hear you say that you found it accurate, because I really wanted to get it right. And I hired a couple of fact checkers, because apparently, you know, book publishing, unlike magazine publishing, doesn't have fact checking. And then I you know, begged Chuck Doswell to give it a read as well, and I sent it out to a number of meteorologists, including some of the characters in the book, and said, you know, if you have time, read it. If you see something wrong, please tell me. And this is something that I think a lot of journalists don't do, because they're afraid that scientists or sources are going to try to rewrite it. But I kind of saw it as a form of peer review. You know, good science gets published and it gets ripped apart by your peers. So why wouldn't I try to do this and get the, you know, they're going to find the errors anyway. Why not do it before it gets published? So I went through it many times trying to get it right and making sure, you know, my metaphors written for the layperson weren't too hackneyed, and, you know, I didn't want meteorologists to palm their forehead and be like, no, that's so wrong, that's too, you know.
We've all done that.
You did a wonderful job, so kudos. And just, you know, just the mere fact that you got Chuck Doswell to read it and respond, and I mean, that's you know, of all the people I know who would be who could potentially be critical of such a work. I mean, he published his review on his blog over the weekend, and it was for a Doswell blog review. It was glowing. So
okay, well, I had read his blog, and I had seen that he was very incisive about pointing out the inaccuracies about describing science in every tornado book out there. And so I thought, well, who better to help me get it right? And I admit he was very intimidating at first. And at first he wouldn't. I don't think we ever talked on the phone because he's been misquoted so many times, and taken out of context and interviewed for hours for a soundbite. And I really respected that and respected his time. So I just said, maybe you can look at some things and point out what's wrong with it and help me get it right. Because he said that no outsider, no non-meteorologist has ever gotten it right. And I really wanted to be that person. I knew I couldn't write for an audience of meteorologists a book that would describe it in a way that was, I guess, in depth enough to do justice from your perspective. But I wanted a layperson to understand it in a way that was really useful to them, but also engaging. So I owe him a huge thank you and debt of gratitude. I told him I would send him Benton's bacon as a thank you, because that's my strange thank you gift. But he I think he eventually warmed up. He did point out a couple times where he said, some of your concepts are seriously flawed. And I said, great. Well, how do I fix that? Because I
He said the same thing to me.
Really?
Trust me, we're in your shoes, Kim.
Yeah.
So he was just great, and James, thank you for introducing us. I feel like it was very nerve-wracking to get to know him, but I really came to like and appreciate him for being just such an individual and no BS about what he has to say. It's kind of refreshing.
He's a straight shooter, that's for sure. What you see is what you get, no doubt. Sometimes you wish it wasn't that way, but no, Chuck is a great guy. A couple more things related to realism, not weather related. I'm going to stop talking. I could go on all night probably, but I thought it was very cool how you wove the different stories together. And in my job is what Brian's job used to be, a warning coordination meteorologist. We interact a lot with firemen, emergency managers, broadcasters. So getting to see some of that side, what the firemen were doing, getting ready, how they were preparing, and how they dealt with the aftermath of the event, and in the realism and the timelines that went with that, and I guess in reading about the book, you went to a lot of pains to do these interviews, and you had transcripts, and another thing related to that is you've got Facebook posts and text messages scattered throughout there. I thought that was a great touch, and talk a little bit about that, and that must have been a huge undertaking to get all that together.
It was, like I said, so much of my time of that year I had, which really, in retrospect, isn't a ton of time, was spent researching. I had to do pre-research to figure out who my characters were and which storylines could braid together. Ideally, the characters cross over at some point and meet. And with nonfiction, you can't make that happen. It either does or it doesn't. And what I wanted to do was kind of create this very accurate timeline based on the sources that are time-stamped and were not available to journalists like Sebastian Junger when he wrote The Perfect Storm. He did an amazing job with the information that existed at that time, but I feel like now with social media and things that are time-stamped, it really took it to a new level of what you could do. So one of the things I wanted to say I started with was James Spann's wall-to-wall coverage was posted online on YouTube in 15-minute increments, and I went and I spent days transcribing the whole thing with little timestamps so that I had a timeline of how the event unfolded, and really importantly, what we knew at any given moment, because I wanted, as a reader, for you to only know what the characters knew at that moment in that scene. I didn't want to be an omniscient narrator where you know what's happening in the future, because I wanted to represent the sense of uncertainty and chaos and fear and panic that everyone felt on that day. So I used that kind of as my baseline, and then I transcribed hours of first responder radio transmissions that were also time-stamped, and that was painful. And I did it for only just a handful of quotes, but people's I guess people's impression of time is very warped by disasters. So some people who I interviewed said, gosh, what does that, I don't know, it could have been hours after, it could have been 10 minutes after, I really don't know. So this helped me keep everything really accurate so that when a responder said, oh, I think we went to that house about this time, I could go back and be like, yeah, you were there at, 5:38 p.m. And then they would, oh, yeah. And then on top of that, the Facebook messages and the Twitter posts and the text messages also were time-stamped. And what was great about those things is they were verbatim, right out of the mouth of the people who were thinking and sharing what they thought and saw at that moment. And that's really hard to do. It's impossible to do without that kind of source for people who are not with us to interview. And so it really gave those characters a voice that I felt was purely their voice. I left the text messages completely unedited, and you can see in the extra spaces and the misspellings of people's names that they were really distracted and quite scared. And I felt like that was a real gift that the families shared with me, that they didn't have to. And then one other thing that was interesting is this must have been one of the most, filmed by, user-generated videoed storms ever. People whipped out their cell phones all over Tuscaloosa and all over the state and filmed this thing, which was really useful to me on a couple levels. One, I was able to see the storm from many different angles. Two, I was able to, hear what people were saying and grab pieces of verbatim dialogue from that. And three, in some of those videos, James Spann is in the background on the radio. So there's a scene where there are two student chasers in a car, and they're driving right in the path of this thing. And because I know Tuscaloosa, I know exactly where they are. And there's no timestamp on their video, but because you can hear James in the background on the radio, I could sort of overlay that on the transcript that I made of his broadcast that day and know exactly where they were, when they were at the intersection of McFarland and 15th Street. And so that was really cool. So a lot of it is very, very accurate, and it just has a lot to do with the sources that were available. And then I have to say, Brian and Tim had a great piece of video that isn't public that allowed me to almost ride along in the car with them and see what they saw and hear what they said, and that just kind of really brought those scenes to life in a way that wouldn't have been possible with just interviews. So it was a challenge, but it was really, really fun.
Hi, Kim. This is John Scala. This is a fascinating discussion. I must admit, I haven't read your book, but I am going to.
Thank you.
My undergraduate degrees are in biology and geology, so I read John McPhee, and I know the books you're talking about. So
Yep.
I'm keenly interested to see how you took this event and discussed it in a manner that maybe he would have done. That'll be fascinating to me. I want to read.
Well, let me know what you think if you've read his work, because I just love it. I have a
Absolutely.
literary crush on him.
It's hard to believe that someone could bring rocks to life, but he could do that.
Exactly.
I want to read a comment that's on, I guess it's the book jacket, and this is by Lee Smith, who's the author of Guests on Earth. This is what he says about your book. Disaster has a soul, and it is deeply, desperately, bravely human. What stands in a storm is the human spirit. Kim Cross has brought the real people behind the headlines vividly to life in these stirring pages. That's an amazing quote. So I'm hooked already. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you.
What I wanted to ask you was the human experiences that you did interact with. I worked at the Weather Channel a number of years ago, and I covered the May 3rd, 99 outbreak live. And I remember a sense of helplessness during that event, that knowing that people were going to die and there wasn't anything I could do about that. How did you deal with the very human, visceral reaction to an event like this? I'm sure you were deeply moved by it, but how did that affect you?
Oh, gosh. I think I'm a different person for it. You really appreciate the power of the human spirit to weather the unthinkable and the power of people to lift each other up. I think I was most moved by the families who really trusted me with the stories of their loved ones who didn't make it. One of the hardest things I think a journalist can do is to approach a parent who's lost a child and ask them to relive the worst day of their life. And learning how to do that and how to do it with respect and compassion, thing that I learned from the whole experience of writing the book, because I didn't want to capitalize on that pain. I wanted to try to understand it and try to, paint it as purely and accurately as they felt it, so that other people who felt that way realized they weren't alone. So it was heartbreaking. I shed a lot of tears in the book, in the process of it, and I did it also with the families. I can't remember if I said this already, but in the fact-checking of the book, the parts that weren't science and weren't just the facts, I sat down with each of 3 families who lost a kid and read them out loud in person the chapters that contained their loved one. And in each time we cried ugly cries together, and we were able to catch some things that were not accurate, but we were also able to kind of share hey, here's what has come of our pain. And I think it'll help people. It'll help other people, because a lot of people experienced unspeakable pain this day, and I think that it's easy to feel like you're the only one who feels that way. But one of the reasons I write is to help people feel not alone, and I think that, channeling that pain into something that was meaningful, not only for the families but for other readers out there, that was part of this process, and that was one of the best things that I took from it personally.
Do you think you'd do this again, Kim? I imagine that this was
absolutely
an incredibly emotional experience.
It was, but that's what I've always wanted to do. I don't know. This sounds really inane, but that movie, The Green Mile,
sure,
where there's that character who kind of like sucks the pain out of someone's knee and then gets rid of it and channels it into the sky. I kind of felt like
coffee, just like the drink.
That's right. I don't know. I feel like there's such a gift in listening to people and letting someone, I don't know, just being there to listen, and then to make something of that is that's meaningful not only to them but to someone else. I don't know if that totally went off the topic of your question, but yeah, it was really painful, and I did a lot of deadline eating, and I gained 15 pounds, and I lost a lot of sleep. But I would definitely do it again. It's I feel like in a way this is the book that I've been waiting my whole life to write, because it is so meaningful. It is, this is our Katrina. This is our 9/11.
Yeah.
And I think that there's healing in it. And, finding meaning in something horrible is a great lesson. And I think that's kind of the theme of the book, is that beautiful things come from our brokenness.
Hey, Kim, this is James. And by the way, I'm going to make the book required reading for all incoming young meteorologists. I just think that it's very important for them to read that. But my question is, you've got a bunch of science people on here. You have gotten into the heart and soul of the people affected by this. What advice would you give meteorologists when it comes to dealing with people and the human effect of these tragedies?
Oh gosh, I don't feel like I'm in a place to give you any advice, but I would rather just say thank you for caring so deeply. I think that what came across in this is that you and Jason and really, not just y'all, but especially y'all, really take seriously the responsibility that doing your job affects people's lives. And you can really tell that from, well, I hope that readers can tell that from this book, because I feel like meteorologists often get a bad rap, and unfairly, because what you're trying to do is so complicated. I mean, if we judged a stock analyst by the same standards, none of them would have jobs. And what you're trying to do is predict the behavior of something as complex and multifaceted as the stock market. So I just think that more meteorologists can learn from y'all, in that you go and you go to people's funerals. You know the stories of so many people who didn't make it through a storm. You know what's at stake, and you care so deeply. So I think it's more that I would love the next generation of meteorologists to care as you do about the human element and the impact of what you do.
How did you decompress, Kim, from this thing? You got heavily involved, emotionally involved. Everybody has to get off the grid and decompress. How did you do that?
Bike rides. I jokingly, well, I'm a cyclist and I'm a bike racer, and mountain bikes, road bikes. I took my bike with me on riding retreats where I would go, and because I have a young son and a husband and friends and my mom, and I had to really hold myself up almost in a cave and be alone with the story and write it down. But I would take breaks and I would go and ride my bike and put myself in physical discomfort, and sometimes I call it the pain cave, and sometimes there are things that you can only learn in the pain cave. So I would go and do that, and if I sweated, it would help. And sometimes just feeling physical pain and discomfort makes you feel better about whatever you're dealing with emotionally. So that was a great outlet for me.
So you talk about the human stories. Was there one in the book that stands out?
It's hard to just single out one, and people ask me that, and on different days I think of different people, and it's really hard to talk about the people because the book's written in such a way that you don't know what happens. So if I answer the question too clearly, then you lose the suspense because you know what happens to the characters, and I deliberately try not to do that because part of the experience of the book is not knowing, and I think if you know what's going to happen to someone, you keep them at an emotional distance. And if you don't know what's going to happen, you allow that character to get into your heart a little bit more, so that when something does happen, you really feel it. I will say that Johnny Parker is very special to me. I think he represents the future of meteorology. Someone who couldn't have done what he does 10 years ago because of social media and technology. But really the families, and when you read the book, you'll know which families I'm talking about. They are, they're really special to me, and their support of the book, their, the relationships we developed in my trying to get to know their people, those things will always be a part of me, and those characters will always, think about them every day. And when I think about certain ones, it makes me go hug my son. So I think that's, the young people who didn't make it.
I have a question. This is Aubrey, and I'm from the Northeast, and unlike most of the guys here, I don't live in a tornado-prone area. I live in a very mountainous area where we get tornadoes. What is the healing process like for a lot of these families? What did you discover in this book?
That's a really good question. I think for each individual it's different, but them created a memorial scholarship because it was a way to do something that helps someone else. Sometimes, their kid will never have their kid back, and that's something that is the worst thing I can imagine, is losing a child. But one thing that I think is universal is no matter how bad you're hurting and how hard a situation is that you can't change, if you help someone else, it makes you feel better. And so some of these families have sent kids to school who would not have had the opportunity to have a college education. Another family allowed me to set up a fund to help military families that are experiencing transition through deployment. And I think just the act of having something constructive to do to help someone else is part of their healing. And then, just remembering, I think, is important. And one thing I wanted people to learn from the book that I'm not sure comes across as clearly as when I try to talk about it is that, how to talk to a mom or a dad who has lost a child. Mm-hmm. So many times, people express their condolences and concerns immediately after, and then after a while they don't know what to say, or they start walking a wide arc around them in the Walmart. And those people end up feeling kind of isolated and feel like the rest of the world is moving on. And that's something that you can never move on with. All you can do is keep living. The way someone said is like, we don't move on. We don't, but we keep living because you have no choice. So I felt like there's such a value in giving them a chance to talk about their kid and not giving them the sad smile. And just, sometimes they just want to remember and share happy memories, just like the parent of a living kid would be like, oh my gosh, one time my son did this, it was just ridiculous, it was so funny. And sometimes they just want to do that, and they don't want pity, and they don't want the sad smile, and they don't want the like, we're thinking about you. They just want to be able to talk about their kid, because remembering them keeps the memory alive, it keeps them alive, and it makes them feel like they're not going to be forgotten. Because I think that is a big fear, that the rest of the world moves on as if their kid never existed, and they're forgotten. So that's the power of story, I think.
I'm just mesmerized, Kim, listening to you. Extraordinary. Did you have an opportunity in the writing of the book to interact at all with behavioral or social scientists and how to deal with people who have experienced trauma like this?
Maybe I should have done that, but I didn't. I talked with Dr. Laura Myers, but it was more on the social science and very beginning of what we're learning from the meteorological standpoint. My dad was a psychologist. I was briefly considered being a psych minor. I'm very interested in how people process things, but I guess I didn't approach it like that. I just approached it from how people cope. I feel like everyone has a story, and you can find out most people's story with 3 questions. What's the hardest thing you've ever been through? How did you get through it? And how did it change you? And the answers to those 3 questions can go on forever, and you can ask them in different ways, but that's kind of how you get to the heart and soul of who a person is and how they have become who they are. Listening to James and how his experience in the 1974 outbreak really shaped who he was today, that's an example of how, beautiful things come from tragedies, where think of all the people whose lives were saved because of what one high school-aged boy endured in 1974. So I think I try to approach it like that instead of from more of a social science standpoint, just from a human standpoint. Like, how did you do it? How did it change you?
Kim, just one final comment for me, and then I'll let the other members ask some more questions. But I want to affirm what you just said. I went through a very difficult time early on. My oldest son, who we nearly lost. And how I got through that was I ran hundreds of miles to get through that. And how did it change me? Well, he's a gift. He's a gift, just like all my children. And I think you're gaining this perspective through the writing of this book, which I think is extraordinary.
Thank you. I'm so sorry to hear about your son. I can't imagine.
Now. He's great. He
is. Okay.
Yeah, he made it. He's 26 now, and he's our miracle.
Oh, well, I bet you appreciate him in ways that you wouldn't have.
Absolutely.
Had you not been through that. And, I'll add to that, one of the things that I went through as I was writing the proposal for the book is my mom, who was a very, very healthy woman in her 70s. She was mountain biking in her 70s. She came up and to visit us for a weekend, and she got bacterial meningitis and almost died. She woke up one morning and thought she had the flu, and 24 hours later she was almost dead. And I'm an only child, and so we brought her home to our house, and I had to kind of, Southern Living very generously let me work from home while I nursed her back to health, but I had to kind of learn how to be a 24-hour nurse, and just our lives changed like that. And we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if she would walk again, if she would ever live on her own, if she would live, period. And it gave me an appreciation for experiences that just seem like they don't make any sense, and they just seem so horrible at the time that you don't even try to make sense of them at the time. But that experience, and she lived with us for more than a year and a half before she was well enough to move back out, and she's awesome now. It really taught me the perspective of, you know, it's the hard times that define us, and it's the hard times that teach us the things that get us ready for the next thing is, and often that next thing is good. And it's working from home prepared me to quit my job and write this book and have the confidence that I had the discipline to work from home and do it. But that made me grow up in so many ways, and now looking back, so many beautiful and great things came of it that wouldn't otherwise have happened. But at the time, I didn't know any of that, and you just have to go on faith that, that there's a reason that this is happening. So I learned a lot from this.
Well, Kim, I have a question that you had so much material from April 27, 2011. How did you refine it to what you were going to follow in the book?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know. You know, I created all sorts of, like, I had 5 timelines, and I had idea boards where I posted pictures of my characters, and I mean, I tried all different sorts of organization, but I'm trying to think how to even answer that question. I don't know. At the end of the day, it's instinct, and it's the idea that, you know, what are the most moving scenes? What are the things from which we can learn something that really is bigger than tornadoes, something universal about the human spirit? And so I tried to kind of hone in on those things and on the little details. I call them telling details. I teach a advanced reporting class at the University of Alabama, and I call them telling details, where there's a lot of details you can throw in there, but you don't want to do all of them. You have to focus on, you know, on one detail. Like, for those of you who have read the book, the fingernails and the mark in the hands, and if you read that, you'll understand. Oh my gosh. And there's a scene where there's a cell phone ringing under a heap of rubble, and a rescuer told me about this. He was digging for a young woman, and he remembered the most telling detail of his night was that sound of the cell phone ringing, because it rang over and over and over. And he had a daughter in college, and he thought, that's her parent calling. That I would be doing the same thing. That's someone's parent calling on the other end, and they still don't know the answer to the worst question of their life. And I kind of went a little further to say, like, well, was it a regular ring, or was it a ringtone? Because these days kids have songs, and their phone plays a song. And he said, you know what? It was a ringtone. And I said, well, what, do you remember what song it was? And he goes, I don't listen to country much, but it was a country song. It was that Miranda Lambert song, The House That Built Me. And I looked at those lyrics, and they're so heartbreakingly poignant in that context. And then I was able, using that detail, to verify that it was that person's mother on the other end, because she had a Beyonce ring for her friends, but when her mom called, it played Miranda Lambert. So I think I tried to focus on those moments and those details that really distill so much more into one image or one visceral scene that says all of the things that you're not saying. This book could have been 5 times as long if I put in everything that I found, but those singular images really say everything, and say things that, they show it, so you don't have to say it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you.
And my last question is actually my last question is actually for Rick. Rick, since you read the book, how important is, since this isn't a weather techie book, how important is it for meteorologists to read this, to understand the other side of our job?
Well, it's hard for me to answer that as a meteorologist, but I would say next to zero, meteorology is required for to read and appreciate this book. It's so much about the people. The meteorology that's in there is explained well, and like Kim mentioned earlier, in very simple terms and using metaphors and things like that. And I think it's I think you get right into it, and the meteorology is such a small part of it. The science of meteorology, I mean, it's there, it's the foundation, but it's about the people. So if that's a consideration for someone not reading it, I don't let that stop you, because it is the furthest thing from a technical meteorology book. It's very well grounded in reality, and there's no big terms, and I thought it was very, very well done and easy to understand the meteorology part of it.
So will it be beneficial for us to read that to understand what some of these people obviously go through? Because we're on this side of it telling the processes, and the book is telling the after side.
Gosh, I think it is. It was very, very powerful to me, and to me it just helps to get an idea, and that's why the accuracy was really hit me hard. Is like, gosh, this is what people were really doing at the time, and you could feel it. You could feel that panic. You could feel that hopelessness as you're waiting for your daughter to pick up the phone, or you're hoping that the shelter that you're in is good enough because that's all you got, and here comes this tornado, and I don't know, it'll stick with me for a while. I think it's very, like I think it was James said it, this should be required reading, because it does tell the human story, and that's what we're all in this for, is for the humans. So I 2 thumbs up.
Hey, let me just say this too. For those that are listening on the audio podcast, I apologize. We had a little glitch introduced in Kim's channel where our audio was feeding back and echoing through her channel, and I have no idea why that happened. So Kim, I have muted you for just a second. If you could unmute before we let you go, please tell everybody how they can purchase your book. And there's a little black, maybe red button up there that says.
Okay, did that work? Is that better?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thanks, James. You can buy it at any bookstore. I will say that Books A Million has done a great job in supporting the book, and they are donating a portion of the proceeds to 3 scholarship funds, as well as Bo Bikes Bama, which is a personally important, Bo Bikes Bama is a nonprofit that was created by Bo Jackson to raise money for tornado disaster relief in Alabama, and now it goes towards the construction of shelters. So awesome thanks to Bo Bikes Bama and Books A Million for that. And Alabama Booksmith also has signed copies, as well as Books A Million. But it's in every bookstore, and my website has a listing of the book signings that I'm going to be doing. I'm in the middle of a book tour. It's kimh.com. But yeah, I want to say thank you to all of you for what you do, and how much respect I have for what you do. If I have a bad day at work, no one gets injured by my bad grammar. And what you do is really, really important and really hard. So thank you for all the efforts that y'all take to keep everyone safe.
Hey, one final question, Kim. Is it going to be an audio version of the book at some point, like on audible.com?
Yes, I just found out that they are going to. I don't know who's reading it, but there will be an audio version.
Great. Okay. Well, Kim, thank you so much. Again, for those that just maybe don't read a lot, and if you love science, and if you love our science, the science of meteorology, I just can't say how great this book is. The science it's well done, and Kim, there's not a single point where anybody in here did this thing. I'm telling you, I think we all expect that from journalists, but you did a remarkable job of getting the science right, getting the stories right. You told these stories respecting the families, and especially those that died, and what it did for me, you told a story I can't tell. I don't have the gift. I can't do it. I'm not qualified to do it. I couldn't do it if I had to. So on behalf of all of us in the science world, thank you for the remarkable work. And I'll let you unmute one more time. There you go.
Yes, and thank you, James. And I really appreciate the time that you spent with me and your crazy busy schedule to learn your story. And thank you for sharing your story, because I think a lot of people will gain a lot from hearing it.
Great. Well, Kim, thank you so much, and good luck on the book tour.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah, again, I don't know why our audio was feeding back down her channel, which who knows? But anyway, the producer will stay up and he'll try and clean up that audio tonight. But we have to take a break because you know what time it is. It's time now for WeatherBrains 101. We have Tony Rice, the Astronomy Report, the Fog Bank, Picks of the Week, email, inbox, Nate's News, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
A couple of weeks ago, we took a look at clouds and their general formation. And most clouds form in response to upward motion. But did you know that there are some clouds that form as a result of sinking air? That's right. Mammatus clouds are pouch-like cloud structures, an example of clouds in sinking air. Sometimes very ominous in appearance, mammatus clouds are harmless, and they do not mean that a tornado was about to form. That association used to be a commonly held misconception. In fact, mammatus are typically seen after the worst of a thunderstorm has passed. As updrafts carry moisture-rich air to the cloud top, upward momentum is lost and the air begins to spread out horizontally, becoming a part of the anvil cloud. Because of its high concentration of precipitation particles, including ice crystals and water droplets, the saturated air is heavier than the surrounding air and sinks back toward Earth. The temperature of the subsiding air increases as it descends. However, since heat energy is needed to melt and evaporate the precipitation contained within the sinking air, the warming produced by the sinking motion is quickly used up in the evaporation of precipitation particles. If more energy is required for evaporation than is generated by the subsidence, the sinking air will be cooler than surrounding air and will continue to sink. The subsiding air eventually appears below the cloud base as rounded pouch-like structures called mammatus clouds. Mammatus can be relatively long-lived if the sinking air contains large drops and snow crystals, since larger particles require greater amounts of energy for evaporation to occur. Over time, the cloud droplets do eventually evaporate and the mammatus dissolve. Mammatus typically develop on the underside of a thunderstorm anvil and can be a remarkable sight, especially near sunrise or sunset when sunlight is reflected off of them. So hang around under some thunderstorms with your camera and you may get some great pictures. If you have a question about the weather, drop a note to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
This Friday is a big day, with 3 Sun, Earth, Moon events all occurring on the same date. The March equinox occurs March 20th at 22:45 Zulu, or 6:45 p.m. Eastern, as Earth reaches one of the points in our year-long trip around the Sun where neither the northern nor southern hemisphere tilt towards the Sun. The Earth's axis, for a moment at least, is perpendicular. This happens again 6 months later during the September equinox. The word equinox comes from Latin for equal night, which might make you think that we'd have 12 hours of daylight on Friday worldwide. Our atmosphere prevents that from happening, though. Each morning, refraction bends the sunrise, causing the sun to first be visible several minutes before it actually physically reaches the horizon. The same thing happens again at sunset, and this causes the day to appear a total of at least 6 minutes longer than it really is. So when is the equinox in terms of day length? Well, that answer varies by latitude. The closest that from the middle of the U.S. southward will see the equal day and night was today. Northern U.S. and Canada will most closely come to that 12-hour day tomorrow, March 17th. March 20th also marks a supermoon, with the moon turning new just 14 hours after reaching perigee, or the closest point in its orbit to Earth. While a supermoon by definition, this is a new moon, so you really won't notice much difference. The next sexier super full moon will occur August 29th. However, the slightly larger new moon could help improve the view a bit for the final Sun-Moon-Earth event on Friday, a rare total solar eclipse coinciding with the equinox. WeatherBrains listeners in the extreme northern Danish and Norwegian islands, you're in the path of totality, and will see 100% of the sun's disk obscured by the moon. The rest of Europe, Russia, the Middle East, and North Africa will see a partial eclipse. Reykjavik, Iceland is the best positioned, with 98% obscured by about 9:30 a.m. GMT. London will also see 85% obscured around the same time. For WeatherBrains listeners in Estonia, the eclipse will begin at 11 a.m. Eastern European Time, with greatest eclipse occurring at 12:07 p.m. with about 75% of the sun obscured. So Tarmo, if you're listening, be sure to send in a report and tweet some pictures if you get them. The next eclipse visible from North America will be a partial lunar eclipse before sunrise on April 4th. Best viewing will be from the West Coast. The East Coast gets its chance on September 27th, with a total lunar eclipse occurring in prime time, beginning at 9:12 p.m. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me on Twitter at RTPHokey for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So I got to go back to Tony's report. So Nate, you say that was Morgan Palmer on the intro of this thing?
That is the man with the pipes, Morgan Palmer, and you'll be hearing that same intro in the news segment as soon as I have 5 minutes to edit it all together.
Wait, let me do this one more time now.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice.
Oh, looking beyond the atmosphere is Tony Rice.
I love that.
Morgan has the best pipes of anybody in this business, no, hands down. All right, so we've talked about the weather. We've got ridging, the big thaw.
Grand Island, Nebraska, according to Travis Klinecki, hit its earliest 90-degree day ever. Records shattered across the whole of the great state of Nebraska today.
Wow.
And we hit 80 here in Raleigh for the first time in 139 days.
What was the high in Oklahoma City, Rick?
I think it's around 78. We were 77 here in Norman, so upper 70s for sure.
Okay, so the core of that heat bubble is just north of you. Then it looks like Kansas and Nebraska. And again, where we are down here, we hit 81 in Birmingham for the first time. This year we hit 80, and John has a nice visualization of the ridge.
Yeah, you can really see that, right?
The death ridge.
The death. But look at the feature that's over Mexico, and again, for those that are listening, there's a little impulse over Mexico, and that's going to lift out and bring some wet weather to where we are later this week. But the question is, will the cold come back? And I guess John is our cold correspondent.
I just want to say, Tom.
John, are we done with it?
No, I don't think we're quite done with it. We're going to get a couple of cold fronts through here in the next. Well, we'll have one tomorrow morning that's going to usher in some pretty good wind, probably down your way as well, Aubrey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my son plays tennis, and I've already been telling him good luck tomorrow in your match. Tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, no, Sunday morning it woke me up at 4:30 in the morning, the darn wind.
Well, as you look across North America, there's a lot of storminess in the northern Pacific. You know, in the extratropical Pacific. Well, that's going to continue to build the ridge out there. So as long as that's the case, guys, we're still got a chance for some cold air here.
Downstream trough, you got it.
You know it.
No, what happens down here in the southern states when it starts to hit 80? People tend to go out to the nurseries and they buy these plants.
Oh yeah.
They want to get them in the ground. We're not even close to the average, last freeze here. Where we are, it's March 23rd, and we've had them as late as April 23rd. So.
How do they not know? I'm honestly baffled by this every year. How do they not know?
I don't know. Every year, there's always a late season cold snap. Some people call it blackberry winter. Well, whatever your terms are. It's just a lock. It's going to happen. So.
Because I just started my seeds inside, just planted the seeds inside this weekend.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move along here because I would imagine we probably have a little email business to take care of.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
And we do have a couple letters, and actually a few letters. This one comes in from Susie, and this is her pick of the week, and it's from canyouactually.com. It is a cloud lamp that creates a thunderstorm inside your bedroom. It says it's the coolest thing ever. It is, I will put a disclaimer on it, over $3,000 for this one.
A lot of WeatherBrains T-shirts we have to sell to get that back behind me.
Yeah. Now, my pick of the week, I'll give you a hint, is a much cheaper and in Aubrey Urbanowitz form, a DIY version. So I will have that one coming up shortly because I will be making and sending Kevin one. Now, we also got another email from John, and since I missed last week because I had a friend in town, I apologize. The Minnesota Severe Storms Conference, which is being held April 11th. It is at the University of St. Thomas in downtown Minneapolis. They have a great lineup planned, and this is their 10th year. Harold Brooks and Skip Talbot will be anchoring our invited speakers list this year, along with radar and forecasting workshop. You can sign up at www.mn, the abbreviation for Minnesota, ssc.org, and you can follow them at Twitter at Minnesota Storm Con, MN Storm Con, C-O-N, and friend them on Facebook. So if you'd like to go to that, that is April 11th, and thank you for sending us that information, John. So if you want to set the email inbox is a little light this week. If you want to send us an email, you can do so by sending us an email to email@weatherbrains.com. Send us your guest suggestions, show suggestions, what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, or if you see a really cool link or photo, we'd love to see it. Go ahead and send it to email@weatherbrains.com. You can also follow us on the Twitter and the Facebook, and you can also check out our website at weatherbrains.com.
I can't do a Morgan Palmer. I just can't do it. Here's Nate with the news. That's all I've got.
That's the big news weather-wise internationally is the monster cyclone Pam, a Category 5 cyclone that struck the tiny South Pacific island nation of Vanuatu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I look at this, and the last I saw was 8 dead, and given what happened, that number could be so much higher, and I mourn for the 8 that we lost, but good grief, that number could be so much higher than that. 90% by some reports of the capital city's buildings are damaged or destroyed, and that's from the central part of the island. We haven't heard from some of the more outlying areas, so certainly wish good thoughts for those folks, and if you're inclined to contribute to a local or a disaster charity that does international work, now would be a good time because those folks need some help. The big news here locally, at least here in the United States, was that the Weather Channel is no longer on Verizon Fios. They were dropped in favor of the AccuWeather weather network. We didn't know that that existed until it got picked up by Verizon, and there have been some interesting reviews. The Weather Channel going, full tilt to try and get the channel back on Fios. Meanwhile, AccuWeather has debuted their network, and they sort of like Weather Nation when they had their moment in the sun on DirecTV or Dish Network, which one of those satellite companies, that they did everything they could to sort of play it up, and the folks at AccuWeather doing the same thing here. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and whether or not, in this case, they did not replace the Weather Channel's channel number, I don't think, with AccuWeather, but it's right next to it, and it'll be interesting to see how things play out over the next few weeks. But it looks like AccuWeather promised that they were going to get into the television network weather business, and they have done so in a full way with Verizon. Speaking of AccuWeather, I'm going to start to sound like AccuWeather's PR department here, but they were recognized by Microsoft as a visionary in the big data category at Microsoft's Convergence 2015 conference in Atlanta. And there are more than 500 nominations from inside Microsoft of companies that they work with or respect or admire across 12 categories. Dr. Joel Myers, the founder, president, and the chairman of AccuWeather, says it's an honor to be recognized as a big data visionary. We continually focus on significant leading data advancements to meet the needs of our growing global audience and partners. So interesting, a lot of good news for AccuWeather here in the last couple of days. Not so good news for our aging satellite infrastructure. The Boston Globe, the latest publication to write on the overall issues with the satellite network, and talking about the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, asking the GAO to study the satellite program and finding all sorts of things, including dysfunctional management, putting American lives. These are comments from Lamar Smith, who's the Texas Republican who chairs the committee, and talking about a gap. We've got a lot of satellites that are going to be ending their lifespans, and we won't have replacements in place by the time they end their official lifespan. So the good news is, by and large, most of these satellites tend to outlive their lifespans, but some don't. And a lot of times, as we saw, what was about a month ago with the DoD satellite that just went boop and exploded, just, for no good reason, when they go, they can go quickly. So something that is of some concern. Write your congressman if that is something that concerns you. Finally, tonight, the Florida Center for Investigative Reporting, this was a bit of a bombshell last week. They published a report entitled, "In Florida, Officials Ban Term Climate Change." And they've done a lot of work talking about this in terms of not just a buzzer, but actually scrubbing it from official publications. This, according to the FCIR, was an unwritten policy that was distributed verbally, but wasn't written down anywhere, but it had affected quite a bit. And if you think about Florida as a state that has been affected by the changing climate, regardless of what's causing the change in climate, they are still dealing with rising waters and that sort of thing. You'd think that they would want to try and hit that head on. It does not appear that they are doing that at this point. So, if you have any other news items for us, send them to me here. Email at weatherbrains.com. You can also find me on Twitter or Facebook. I am NSJ on Twitter and Nate Johnson on Facebook.
Hey, Kevin, you on Meerkat yet?
No, I've been hearing about that, and I guess I tweeted out, I think, some article about that earlier today, where my comment was that it's just another example of riding on the back of a platform that you don't own or control, and how you are subject to the whims of them. Because I guess these Meerkat people just had the rug pulled out from under them. Am I right?
Yeah, Twitter, I don't know how many days they were up, maybe 5 or 6 days, and if you went onto Meerkat, basically the social graph from Twitter translated to Meerkat. Well, it doesn't do that anymore. You have to build everything from scratch, followers and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's a problem. Of course, part of the deal is that Twitter they bought some upstart company that's doing the same thing. But I will say this, it is very intriguing. I think there's something to it. Is this the ultimate platform? Probably not, but it is hot as a firecracker. I mean, everybody is using Meerkat. In fact, I thought about doing a Meercast of the show tonight, but that would be too obnoxious. But so you haven't tried this at all, have you, Kevin?
No, I haven't yet. And it sounds like maybe it's just trading one problem for another. I mean, it's you depend on Twitter, and Twitter pulls the rug out from under you. For what if you go and depend on Meerkat, and then something happens to Meerkat, or they pull the rug out from under you? And this is just one of my fundamental complaints about all this from the beginning. And I know I'm still old and grumpy on this, but we just missed the boat. I mean, if anybody had the wherewithal and the money to create platforms to do this stuff, it would have been broadcasting. And we didn't, and that's one of the main reasons that I get so frustrated at all this. I caught bits and pieces of the chat with Kim, and I wish I could have come in a little bit more. We were doing our Fox show, but it sounded like you guys were circling around a lot of the questions that I had, and I'm anxious to go back and look and listen to it. But a lot of times I think... Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, go ahead. We had some audio issues that I'm going to have to see if the producer can clean those up. But go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I heard her mention a couple times, because she works so closely with you on this book, and a lot of times I get confused or frustrated because your model, while obviously very successful, is not repeatable. You came up during a certain point in time, and you did certain things that I don't think most people can repeat. And I get notes from people every now and then that say, well, because they know that I know you, and that that I came up under you, and they want to know what's going on and some of the background stuff, and that becomes very, very frustrating for me, because you have an infrastructure around you, and you have your separate company, which a lot of people know, but a lot of folks are just left out there with companies who are just wanting more for nothing more or no added benefit, and I don't think a lot of people understand that, but it worries me that we continue down this path of things like Meerkat is the next thing, and we jump in and we get a bunch of people there, and we're watering down the message, and we're just pushing information at people. In fact, I just put a comment on something else that came up on Facebook about, and we've talked about this before, push versus pull. No one ever came into your living room and forced you to watch the local newscast. It was a choice. People said, oh, I'm going to watch the local newscast, and they turned it on. And where we're heading now is that not only every television station, but every other brand, whether it's somebody who sells shoes or orange juice or whatever it is pushing information at you. And it just becomes this cacophony of noise, and that's why there is the Facebook algorithm. But if we're doing nothing but push, I don't think it's as effective. I don't think it's as good a way for people to get information. And then what happens is you go down this path of degeneration into clickbait. And that was what the comment was on Facebook, where it just becomes this, let me get as many clicks as I can. It doesn't matter how I get them or with what. And
I think you're looking at that point, we found a metric, and that is clicks, and now we're going to find ways to game that metric
to
make it look as whatever. But in terms of you talk about the finding news and push versus pull and everything, and there's a study that was released just today by the Media Insight Project, which is the Associated Press and the American Press Institute, and talking about millennials, so the 18 to 35 crowd that I'm looking at in my rearview mirror, and it's getting smaller and smaller every day. But that group that they don't a lot of times go online looking for news, but they expect to find it there anyway, in the sense that they go to places like Facebook and Snapchat and Twitter and Meerkat, looking for looking for whatever. And at that point, they will a lot of times be exposed to news content that they might not have otherwise been exposed to, and in some cases will actually use that as a jumping off point to either learn more about other news stories that might be related or to dig more deeply. And one of the interesting things was, in some cases, people would be drawn into a story, and I've noticed this effect, and I've been sucked into this effect, where you'll get sucked into a story or some sort of news content because some friend of yours thought it was interesting and shared it or was passionate about it, and you get pulled into it that way. And that's the kind of thing that would never happen with the traditional 6 o'clock news. You're gonna get what Tom Brokaw reads to you, and you're either gonna care about it or not. But whether your college roommate from 20 years ago thinks that it's an interesting thing, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but where it causes a problem from a business model standpoint is you're all of a sudden now exposed to 1,000 different stories in an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, but none of them are from the same place.
Yeah.
And so the business model that we had was we could gather a big audience around one central umbrella product that was sort of trying to be one size fits all. But the difficulty now is that it's 1,000 different outlets or 1,000,000 different outlets, and so that's where I see the TV going. And based on this other comment, is that okay? Well, if we're not going to get as many clicks on the I'm not going to explain this right. What it requires is going toward that clickbait thing. You have to be more sensational in order to get just enough clicks or a few more clicks from a bunch of different groups or tribes or subgroups in order to maintain the big infrastructure that you had. I'm increasingly starting to think that digital is not going to support the infrastructure of the old model, and I think there's going to be a big crash down there.
I don't think it will either, but here's the thing. Television's been doing the clickbait thing for years. I mean, we do everything to game for ratings. We have been for 20, 30, 40 years, ever since Nielsen started sending diaries out. It's been trying to find ways to gin people up to watch. I mean, cliffhanger season finales and to be continueds, and we put the most interesting stuff. I mean, who here on TV is allowed to vacation during sweeps? You're not, because apparently that's when we got to game the system in order to get the ratings, instead of focusing on providing content 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which is what we should be thinking about, and scheduling accordingly. We schedule up so that all the main folks are there for 4 months out of the year, and the rest of the time, it depends. Some stations are different about this than others, but you're going to find your main talent, unless there's a health issue or something, you're going to find all your main talent there 5, 6, and 10 through those 4 months, and the rest of the time it's going to be hit or miss.
I like how I just asked Kevin if he got on Meerkat and his head exploded.
That'll teach you to ask me a question.
This is great. Hey, we got to roll the fog bank, and Nate, I got to do some television. So after the fog bank, the program belongs to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here is Skydave.
Initiating startup sequence.
Hello, WeatherBrains listeners. This is Dave Phillips, Skydaver on Twitter. First up, I've got a picture of the tornado-shaped building proposed for Tulsa. Looks pretty stupid to me. Next, from Earth Science Picture of the Day, we've got ice circles on a river, a great aurora photo at Astronomy Picture of the Day, yet another aurora photo from spaceweather.com. They tweeted a photo from NASA. That spaceweather.com page also had a great photo of an M5 class eruption on the Sun captured from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. Angela Fritz wrote at the Capital Weather Gang about the groundskeepers at Fenway Park and snow removal. They spread by hand 2 tons of black sand over the snow to help get it to melt faster and avoid damage that plowing or other removal methods might cause. I'll close tonight with an interesting cloud photo from Earth Science Picture of the Day, a smoke plume above a fog layer. Thanks for listening. Skydaver out.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Thank you, Skydaver. And for those of you who are maybe new to the program and wondering what this whole foghorn thing is all about, if you don't have a pick, you get the foghorn. And this is Picks of the Week, where you have to share something weather-related with the group. And our good friend J.B. Elliott, who retired from the show some time ago, would from time to time not have a pick because he was a busy man, very important. The demands on his time were significant. And so Skydaver stepped in with the foghorn to make sure that JB always had a pick. So a little bit of WeatherBrains history trivia there on your Monday night. My pick of the week is an article by Dennis Mercereau of The Vane talking about why Fahrenheit gets a bad rap and why, it's not so bad after all. And I think the graphic that one of his commenters posted I thought was great. Fahrenheit from 0 is cold, 100 is hot. 0 in Celsius is freezing, 100 you're dead. Kelvin, 0 you're dead, 100 you're dead. I kind of like Fahrenheit. And somebody else pointed out something that was really interesting. If you can tell just by the tens digit on Fahrenheit, the first digit you come to, what you need, how you need to dress. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 30s. You can't do that with Celsius. You can't, because the low end of the 20s, you probably need to have pants and a coat, and the high end of the 20s, you need to have a swimsuit. It's meaningless. You need more digits. So anyway, that's my pick of the week. Rick Smith, I'm going the other direction tonight, across the bottom of my screen. Rick Smith, pick of the week from you, good sir.
I'm glad I'm paying attention. My pick of the week, I'm kind of in that getting ready for spring mode. That's what we're doing here now, and I think it's a good time to roll.
Have you cleaned out your tornado shelter, by the way?
No, that is a very special occasion reserved for imminent threats.
That tweet from however many years ago I have in a couple of my social media presentations. I'm still getting mileage out of that tweet many years later. So thank you, sir.
It's no problem. It's the spiders didn't appreciate it much, but my family did.
They never do.
But in that mode of getting ready for spring, I resurrected. Well, this isn't that old of an article, but something from the Weather Channel about fake and overused photographs. I mean, we've seen it in the winter. We see it with every type of weather, but as we get into spring, we're going to start to see these recycled photos, photoshopped, and fake images of things. So just a caution about some of the most overused and fake photos, and I think there's some tips in there too to how to root those out and see. So if you don't know where it comes from, if you don't know for sure what it is, then just don't share it.
Good advice. Good advice. And while we're on the advice, if you're taking videos or pictures, please go on ahead and turn that phone sideways. Get the video landscape. It just looks so much better. It fills the screen. Looks good on your computer, which your monitor is probably sitting on its side like that. And if you're going to have it on TV, it looks so much better on TV too. Let's see. Kevin Stelly stepped away to do a little television. His pick of the week was talking about the breaking winter records in Boston. They broke their all-time seasonal snowfall record today, 108 inches, I think, something like that. That's just nuts. I mean, that's just crazy to get that much snow. But our thoughts are with folks in Boston still digging out there. And now Dr. John Scala will come to you next, talking about tornado drills, your pick of the week.
Yeah, Nate. One note about Boston, I think they're going to get more snow. They're not done yet. I don't mean to laugh at them, but having spent winters in Rochester, New York, I do understand what it means to be overwhelmed by snow. My pick of the week is a piece done by KTVI in St. Louis, and the lead here is some are questioning the need for tornado drills. And what they're talking about is, do we still need statewide tornado drills? Interesting article.
It's very interesting, and I'm interested to see if any of the social science folks have any thoughts on that, because one of the things that in my research that I found in surveying other research projects that looked at tornado response, one of the key indicators of whether or not somebody was likely to take shelter was whether or not they had practiced, whether or not they knew where the shelter was and knew how to do it. And if you haven't done it before, or if you haven't done it recently, if you haven't practiced, you might not feel as comfortable trying, and you might not try. You might just be more likely to let the tornado come and get you. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. And it's in St. Louis, Missouri. We'll see how that turns out and what sort of reception that idea gets. Brian Peters, pick of the week from you, sir.
No, I get the foghorn this week.
Hey, Brian, you can take mine that I just posted in there. On Kim Cross's website, there's a very cool behind the scenes of how she did the timelines and how she did transcriptions and things like that. So,
okay, I'll take that one.
Okay,
there you go. So I take back
undo the foghorn.
All right.
That sounds even worse than it going forwards.
Well, it does, I tell you. So looking ahead in the calendar, of course, today was WeatherBrains 477. Next week we have had to defer this for a number of different reasons. Looks like we're finally going to get it on track just in time for spring break. The educational special talking about how you need to plan if you want to get into this crazy weather business, how far in school you need to go, some of your education options from high school all the way up. That's going to be good. A couple weeks down the road past that, we've got Dr. Jamie Rome from the Storm Surge Unit of the National Hurricane Center. He's also a proud graduate of North Carolina State University. Go Wolfpack. And looking forward to having him on. He's always, I think he took lessons from Bill Reed. He's a fairly... For somebody who's not the director of the Hurricane Center on the door of retirement, he's fairly free speaking, which is good. I enjoy conversations with Jamie. We have Tom Fay talking about Capitol Hill, doing a little weather policy coming up in April, and we've got some other shows in the queue. If you've got any guest suggestions, we love hearing from you. We had one just this week. We're going to try and get Kevin Kleesel from OU back on the show, and maybe we can get him to bring in the new incoming meteorologist in residence, none other than Gary England there at OU. That's going to be an interesting thing to see how that plays out. He's there mostly to do some produced specials and whatnot for OU, but looking forward to seeing in what other capacities he finds himself in before that's all said and done down there. And good for Gary, good for OU, and I think that's going to be an interesting partnership to see how that plays out. And a lot of folks, I think, wouldn't mind being the meteorologist in residence at a large research-run university in their retirement. A lot of worse things you could do. So if you have any guest suggestions, send them to us, email at weatherbrains.com. You can also send us news items, pick of the week suggestions, guest suggestions, comments, viewers or listener surveys. If you love the show, hate the show, whatever, you can send us those. You always love getting comments as well on iTunes and Stitcher and all the other podcasting platforms. You can find us there, and we certainly love to hear from you there. This is WeatherBrains. It is the All About the Weather Netcast. In case you've gotten an hour and a half into this and forgot what you were listening to, this is the All About the Weather podcast that we do every Monday night, normally at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, via a Google Hangout. You can always listen anytime using your favorite podcasting app. You can find us there on iTunes and Stitcher and all the other stuff. Plus, the video is stored on YouTube forever. So you can come back and relive this episode in living color should you want to. Brian Peters shaking his head no. Probably. But you can check us out anytime.
That's a scary thought, you know?
I tend to agree. Anybody want to look at this group, with the exception of Aubrey, anybody want to look at this group for an hour and a half, I got to wonder about your sanity. But anyway, this is WeatherBrains. Hope you had a great one. Until next time, I'm not James Spann. Good night. God bless.
Y'all take care. See you next
Good
week.
night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
interview. Appreciate it.
Now, Noah's partner, Sharna Burgess, was quick to point out that every Monday he will inspire millions of people.
And you can participate in a watch party for Noah Galloway next Monday. It will be held at the Comedy Club Stardom in Hoover. A former Dancing with the Stars participant will hold a group class shortly before the show. Proceeds go to the Noah Galloway No Excuses charitable fund. Still ahead, creating an inclusive workplace.
See how Alabama businesses are supporting the LGBT community.
50 years ago in Selma set the stage for a generation to look.
Find out how many businesses are taking a pledge for equality.
But one state may be encouraging discrimination, how it wants to allow businesses to refuse service to gay couples.
And the March Madness matchups are set. But see how gambling on your brackets may be a bad bet in the workplace.
The warmest day so far in 2015. We enjoyed low 80s today. Temperatures tonight mostly in the 50s and low 60s. Changes coming up by midweek. I'm James Spann. The complete forecast is coming up as ABC 3340 News at 10 o'clock continues. So this is the WeatherBrains post show.
How many hits do you have there?
We typically have about 2,500 that watch live. Of course, the show's ended. But what's weird, I've still got the YouTube stream going.
Right.
So this is going to be on YouTube. Be on there forever. So this is the post show. So Kevin's camera's hot. My camera's hot. We both do 10 o'clock weathercasts. So I typically walk in there and say hello to everybody and go on some tirade. But I just thought I would join hang out with my phone here, and it looks great.
So you can see us?
Yes, I'm pointing at you. This is live on the. We still have a whole bunch of people. What creeps me out is that people wait for me to come back there and go on these bizarre tirades at the end of the show. So I just thought we'd just do something different here and see.
That's what we wait for every day.
Exactly.
James to go on a bizarre tirade.
So we did Meerkat Friday night. Now we're doing YouTube live with this is the WeatherBrains. This is the big blowtorch here. This is big. So I don't know why I decided to turn this on, but I thought for all these people that are waiting on me to come back over there, now you get me right here. Ooh. Now we had Kim Cross, the author, on tonight. She did a great job. Kim's on the book tour. She was over in the Mississippi Delta in Greenwood from a hotel, but she did a great job. Had a great conversation. Probably Kevin and I have to just leave at 10. We should walk out of the show and just leave. So Nate Johnson picks it up from me. So anyway, I just thought I'll stream what I do here. Here, I'll put this up. Hang on here. Let's see if I can make it work. Get the big green wall in there. Way too many doohickeys here. Let me switch the camera. Yeah, there we go.
The investigation into Secretary of State Hillary Clinton
Scott Graphics, radio and weather.
ABC 3340's Christine Frizzell reports about the new calls for an investigation.
Washington. The pressure is not letting up on former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the controversy over her private email server.
We don't get to grade our own papers in life, and she had a very unique arrangement with herself as it relates to public records.
That was Congressman Trey Downey on Sunday. He's already called for Secretary Clinton to testify before Congress, not once, twice.
And it's unjust and simply wrong for anyone to withhold evidence that may lead to answers.
They're answers that may or may not be found in future congressional testimony, which political expert Laura Brown calls largely ineffective.
Part of the problem in today's world of congressional testimony is that each member of the committee tends to try to make news or make the soundbite.
In the past, committee members would often work together on a strategy that would sort of walk and tackle the witnesses instead of trying to score political points or get new material for campaign commercials.
No one wants their personal emails made public.
While former Secretary Clinton has denied any wrongdoing, Brown says Congress does have the right to proceed.
Well, the president and the executive branch essentially runs things in the bureaucracy. Congress is constitutionally the one who both funds it and essentially checks up on it.
That could include a
Let's start with pictures in the iPad first, Daniel. We'll do that first.
And a new chapter of the investigation, which Speaker John Boehner says
Gotta go, sorry.
this week. In Washington, I'm
He's putting us up on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Now we're back on here. Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. No, this is WeatherBrains. I mean, until I go over there and take it down, it stays up. And traditionally, I walk over there at 10:35 and go on a tirade about something. Yeah. Well, no. I had to take this camera down to do the slideshow. I couldn't do them both. Yeah. So. But on the WeatherBrains, you got two dead cameras on there now, Kevin's and Dex Sexus and me, because we're both doing the weather on television, so it's very strange. This was the post show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and mic checks.
Thank you.
No, boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and mic checks. That's what you get on the post show here. Dave, got a boring story for us?
No, I don't even have a boring. I'm so boring, I don't even have a story.
Boy, Dave was cranky earlier tonight. His earplug wasn't working. Was it? What? Brackets. All right, WeatherBrains fans, I'll see you at 35 after the hour. We're terminating this broadcast.
Ho, 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 ho. Kev, I got to go, man. That was a good rant you went on. You still there? Is he frozen or is that him? He's moving. Hey, talk to me. He's not going to say a word. He looks like the thinker. Apparently he's in the newscast and can't talk. Hey, I got to unplug this thing, guys. Thank you all. Have a great week. I'm out. Good day. Bye-bye.